She and Wright's live sessions at the Women Deliver Conference are being hosted at the D03 Exhibition Space in Melbourne Conference and Exhibition Centre. All sessions are hybrid, live streamed, and host online and on-site speakers and participants, including media. She and Rights is co-hosted by Global Center for Health Diplomacy and Inclusion and CNS, with partners like Women Deliver Conference 2026, International Planned Parenthood Federation, Asian Pacific Resource and Research Center for Women, Asia Pacific Media Alliance for Health, Gender and Development Justice, and Health TV Online Nepal. This session spotlights that gender equality and human right to health, including right to safe abortion services, are inseparable and critically important if we are to deliver on SDG 3 of health and well-being and SDG 5 on gender equality, where no one is left behind. Sexual and reproductive health rights are an integral element of the right to health. Yet we know when we are speaking specifically about abortion care that obstacles exist. They are interrelated and entrenched and operate at different levels in clinical care, at the level of health systems, and in the underlying determinants of health. Abortion is health care. Access to abortion is a human rights issue. Full stop. Safe abortion saves lives. It is an essential component of sexual and reproductive health provision and central to reproductive autonomy and freedom and bodily integrity. Discriminatory practices and laws not only violate women and people who require abortion's rights, but also contribute to poor health outcomes, which exacerbate existing health inequalities. Without any further ado, let us listen to our first speaker, Debanjana Choudhuri, a well-known independent gender justice activist. Over to you, Debanjana. Yes,
Uh,
Debanjana, are you there?
I, um, I, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can we go first with Pauline, please? Sorry, or Kalpana.
Or, all right. I think Debanjana is not able to connect right now. So we will listen to Pauline Fernandez, coordinator, Philippines Safe Abortion Advocacy Network, or PINSAN as we call it. Thanks, Pauline, for joining us online and for the courage and sincerity with which PINSAN is championing the cause of abortion rights. Over to you.
Hi. Is my audio okay? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, it is.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Shobha. Thank you. Safe Abortion Advocacy Network, or PINSAN, and we're based in Metro Manila, Philippines. So, PINSAN was founded in 2015 by a network of legal and medical experts, community-based leaders, um, faith-based advocacy groups, and other sexual and reproductive health and rights advocates. So, a couple of years prior to our founding in 2012, the Philippines had passed the landmark RPRH law, or the Responsible Parenthood and Reproductive Health Act. And for the women's movement, its passage was not just a legislative victory, but the culmination of a grueling more than a decade of struggle that united advocacy groups to reframe reproductive health as human rights and social justice issue. However, despite these hard-won victories, SRHR remains, under prioritized in the national agenda. Even within the broader movement, abortion rights are often treated as a fringe and contentious topic. And Pinsan was born out of the confrontation of that uncomfortable truth that the RPRH law itself, while of course landmark, ultimately had to leave abortion rights issues at the negotiate at the in the negotiation table. And as a network, we see the imperative to keep that conversation going and to center abortion rights issues on our right to bodily autonomy, our right to compassionate and non-judgmental healthcare, um, our right to a legal landscape that doesn't punish us for accessing care and wanting to decide what happens to our own bodies. But obviously, it hasn't been without its challenges. The Philippine abortion laws are among the most restrictive in the world. Abortion is a criminal offense, um, punishable for years of imprisonment for care providers and persons who seek care. And the law doesn't explicitly permit abortion under any circumstances, even in cases of rape, incest, or threats to life or health. However, there are cases where therapeutic abortion may be performed to save a pregnant person's life. But this is like a gray area within our legal and medical landscape. And despite it being criminalized, abortion remains a widespread and urgent reality in the Philippines. So data shows that the Philippines, upwards of 1 million women undergo abortions annually. So this is equivalent to 1 out of 20 women of reproductive age who are likely to have undergone an abortion. So just to put it into perspective, you can be in any classroom, in your office, in a random restaurant, and it's likely that someone had undergone an abortion there. And that's how prevalent it is, despite how restrictive the laws are. So, meaning Filipino women resort to clandestine and unsafe methods to end their pregnancies, um, proving that restricting abortion does not stop it. Instead, it drives the practice underground. It puts women's health and lives at risk. And because of abortion-related complications, data shows that 3 women die every day. Um, and moreover, while the law technically allows for post-abortion care, the criminalization of abortion itself creates a climate of fear. So women suffering from complications, they delay seeking help because they are terrified of being arrested. Healthcare providers, bound by their own perceptions on abortion and fear of prosecution, may threaten or delay treatment for these women. Turns hospitals into sites of interrogation rather than of care and of healing. And these laws, they also validate social stigma, forcing women to carry the trauma of unsafe procedures in silence, and prevents us from advocating for our rights, effectively like insulating the state from accountability um, for the public health disaster that it's created. And then to hold the state and different actors accountable, we really have to unmask the forces that hold us like hostage from fully accessing our reproductive rights. The movement against abortion rights in the Philippines is often dismissed as purely religious and conservative, but in reality, it's this sophisticated political machinery that weaponizes culture and faith to entrench this inequality. And given that abortion issues disproportionately affect women, it reinforces this need to control women's bodies and women's decision making and upholds this systemic barrier to justice. And we see this in the halls of Congress and Senate, where, for example, the recent passage of the Prevention of Adolescent Pregnancy Bill was blocked because it presented language on sex and gender and reproductive health that isn't palatable to some, saying that it would hypersexualize children, among other arguments. We see this in how government agencies who have expressed support for the decriminalization of abortion are threatened with their budgets being slashed. We see so-called like pro-life movements, which are actually anti-rights movements, take up space online or hold mass mobilization centered on disinformation or fear-mongering. And perhaps the most dangerous phase of this anti-rights movement is within the healthcare system itself. We see hospital staff who emboldened by this anti-abortion climate, interrogate, shame, and delay treatment for women bleeding from complications, effectively acting as kind of this moral police rather than medical providers. We see abusers of conscientious objection clauses, where doctors refuse to provide even legal reproductive health services like contraceptives or post-abortion care, citing religious beliefs, over their sworn duty to save lives. And as mentioned earlier, these are usually framed through the guise of religiosity or care for Filipino values. But this narrative really, it's a calculated tool for inequality and forces women to carry the disproportionate burden of reproduction while stripping us of our fundamental right to choose for our own bodies. And by framing abortion as a moral crime rather than a healthcare necessity, the state and its conservative allies, they use faith and values as a shield to ensuring that their bodies remain public property rather than our own. There is also a growing international backlash that is not happening in a vacuum, and it creates a direct and suffocating ripple effect in the Philippines. For example, the US withdrawal from international organizations, it's not just a diplomatic move. It also signals permission from global superpowers that it's okay for governments to deprioritize gender equality, and it may feel less pressure to comply with international treaty obligations. We saw this in action during the Philippines' recent Universal Periodic Review at the UN Human Rights Council. And despite receiving direct urgent recommendations to decriminalize abortion and pass the SOGI Equality Bill, for example, the Philippine government did not accept these recommendations, dismissing them as contrary to a so-called national culture and religious values. Um, and within PINSAN, the centerpiece of our campaign is the call to decriminalize abortion in the Philippines. And this means that abortion will no longer be treated as a crime. And what we want from this decriminalization campaign is to remove abortion provisions from the revised penal code, ensuring that no one gets jailed for having, assisting with, supporting, performing, or providing quality abortion care, um, recognizing the negative impact of criminalizing abortion. This is in line with the World Health Organization recommendation on decriminalization. And this is all in line with the belief that abortion care is an essential form of healthcare and that healthcare should not be a crime. And aside from abortion in the Philippines, no other healthcare is regulated under the penal code and other criminal laws. And that the decriminalization of abortion, um, through this campaign, we see it's an urgent life-saving step, and it removes the stigma and fear that harms the health and lives of Filipino women and girls. And we also see that there are more and more civil society actors that are coming out in public and speaking on the issue. And the value of this is more than just gaining numbers for a movement. It's knowing that there are people and groups supporting the movement, and this allows advocates to gain the confidence to push forward, and more importantly, for persons who feel alone in what they're going through, to find safe spaces within these different advocacies and campaigns. And talking about abortion in the Philippines, it's very taboo, it's very controversial. You get judged for it, you risk being prosecuted, whether legally or socially. Um, and despite that, when you have brave advocates coming forward and openly supporting the call, and persons sharing their firsthand experiences, it transforms like the very nature of our struggle. And it means that somehow we have shattered the isolation that the state and conservatives have used to silence us about talking about this issue. we are moving from a position of vulnerability to one of collective power. And these initiatives, these efforts, despite the limited resources that we have, and despite the anti-movements that threaten us, prove that despite threats and the stigma, there is still a critical mass of Filipinos ready to stand on the right side of history to ensure that no one has to fight for their bodily autonomy alone. And as we're going through the year 2026, facing a rising tide of global and local anti-rights pushback, our response really must be rooted in accountability, in claiming our rights. And we can no longer allow repressive actors to hide behind its restrictive laws and create a public health crisis that's claiming the lives of countless women across the globe every day. And we move forward to reclaim our dignity and rewrite the narrative of reproductive health in the Philippines and across the globe, ensuring that the future is defined not by punishment and stigma, but by compassion, healthcare, and the fundamental freedom to decide for our own bodies. So again, I'm Pauline Fernandez from the Philippine Safe Abortion Advocacy Network. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Pauline. Excuse me. And the problems which exist in Philippines are there in other countries too. And even where abortion is legalized, I think there are many caveats placed into who can actually access them. And all those who are in need of it are not able to do that. We go back to Debanjana. I think she is very much there online. Over to you, Debanjana.
Hi, Shobha. I hope you're doing well and you've traveled.
We can't hear you. Maybe.
And I absolutely want to congratulate CNS Media, you and your entire team for bringing journalists, media personnels, and experts from all over the world to talk about abortion as a human right. I want to start with something very simple and something that in 2026 should not be controversial. Every person, regardless of where they were born, what they earn, who they love, and how they identify, deserves the right to make decisions about their own body. That is not a political position. This is the foundational premise of human dignity. And yet, across the world,
I think there are some internet issues there. We can't hear you again.
Reproductive health, gender rights, and public policy across South Asia and some parts of Southeast Asia and Africa. And I've sat down with communities and states where contraceptive prevalence is devastatingly low. I have worked in countries where abortion is criminalized so completely that even miscarriage becomes grounds for an investigation. And it happens even now as we speak in 2026. I've led coalitions, shaped policy, and navigated the most hostile legal environments, unimaginable conditions. And I can tell you that the battle is far from over. From every one of these contexts is this: making abortion illegal does not make abortion rare. It completely makes it dangerous. It makes it deadly. And it makes it a privilege of the wealthy, while the most marginalized bear the consequences, where their bodies and their lives are obviously not as valued as those with the money. So when you told me that, hey, Debanjana, we are going to have a conversation on safe abortion as a human right, I thought that how tragic it is that we still need to talk about it, and talk about it like our feminists used to talk about 20 years ago. And it's absolutely devastating. Safe abortion is a human right, and it's not conditional. It is not a medical concession, and it is not a last resort. And I want to really categorically state my stance that yes, it is a right. And when I say all persons, I mean all persons. This conversation has for too long centered a single image, that the image has excluded people who do not fit neatly within the gender binary. Trans men, trans women need abortions. Non-binary people need abortions. But are they in the conversations? They aren't. Intersex people need abortions. Where do we find them in conversations, in our communities, in our policies? We do not find them. The right to bodily autonomy does not belong to a category. It belongs to every person who has a body and has a life to live. When we design policy, we build health systems, we train providers, we train our frontline workers, and we do not train them about dignity. We do not train them about how to have the conversation about abortion, how to have a conversation about non-binary individuals. We just do not. Because the moment we narrow who counts, we have already begun to compromise the principle. And this is what happens. We compromise the principle because we do not count, our policies do not count, they do not acknowledge the trans people. And lastly, I would like to say that choice is a word that I want to really talk to you about for a moment and dwell on it, because it is often misunderstood and sometimes deliberately. Choice does not mean indifference to the weight of the decision. It means trust. And of course, abortion seekers have the choice, and the choice has to be trusted. And it does not mean that the choice is negotiable. The choice is not negotiable. I have met women who chose to continue pregnancies in most difficult circumstances, and people who have not, because the reasons were their own, they were individual reasons. And we need to understand that an abortion seeker's journey, even in my country, in India, it is extremely solitary. It's a very isolating journey. And both the decisions deserve dignity. And often we see the anti-choice groups co-opting our language and bringing in concepts of, family and how a traditional family should look like, and further create complications in already very complicated narrative and discourse around abortion. Dignity is not something that we grant people when they make choices we approve of. Dignity is unconditional. Otherwise, it is not dignity at all. In my work in leading Pratigya campaign for gender equality and safe abortion in India and in several Asian countries, in my partnerships with organizations, and also in my work in Philippines, I have seen that, we have to continue to fight. We need to continue to advocate. And the fight will look very different at different levels. At times, we need to have a very diplomatic advocacy approach at national levels in order to bring in policy changes. And then there is a huge fight of translating that policy on ground so that the people, the providers who are actually providing the abortion, they are understanding what these policy changes look like. Lastly, I would like to end with is something that I very firmly believe in, is that when a right disappears, the moment it becomes inconvenient to power, it is not a right. It is a permission, and permissions can be revoked. Unfortunately, many of our policies that legalize abortion in many of the countries, they seem like permission. And we always live in this fear that it can be revoked because it is conditional. We are at a moment globally where those permissions are being revoked in legislation, in court rulings, and in quiet defunding of services that people depend upon. And the response to that moment cannot be silence or compromise. It must be clarity. Safe abortion is a human right. Choice is expression of dignity, and every person across every dignity, every identity, every geography, every circumstance deserves both. And this is what I've spent my career fighting for. And thank you again, Shobha, for having me and giving me this privilege to be able to speak to all of you. And have a wonderful Women Deliver, and in solidarity with all of you.
Thank you very much, Debanjana. We are missing you here on site. But yes, you have said it rightly, that it should not be something like a permission. And also the anti-rights movement is fueling this concept or this idea of abortion being something very sinful and not to be part of our rights. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is my fellow sister, resistor, and persister, Kalpana Acharya, editor-in-chief, Health TV Online, Nepal, and host of the famous Health First podcast. We are fortunate to have Kalpana here on site in Melbourne with us today. Kalpana, please share your insights.
Thank you, Shobha. Thank you so much for this great opportunity. Yes, Shobha earlier mentioned that abortion right is human rights. Yeah, but every woman should get it without any troubles and without any hindrance, this right. But even now, many women are dying because of the unsafe abortion. Talking about the Nepal situation, abortion is legal in Nepal since 2002, but not equally accessible for all even now. Many women are still struggle to access safe abortion. Unsafe abortion remains concerned. Last week only, I want to share one story, exactly a sad story, I mean to say. A 29 years mother lost her life just because of unsafe abortion. She is the health worker. She is educated person. Her husband also health worker, but unfortunately, she went for her abortion in a clinic which is not registered because there is a big stigma. She is known by many people. That's why she chose that clinic so that no one knows him or her, her family. So strong social stigma is persist still now in Nepal, gap between policy and implementation. We have wonderful law, very progressive law, SRHR law, but implementation part is very poor. And unsafe abortion is the third leading cause of maternal death in Nepal. It is almost 7% maternal death in Nepal. We talk about only 42% abortions are done by trained providers. It means 58% abortions are unsafe in Nepal till now. Lack of awareness is a very big issue. Only 41% of women know about the safe abortion law. That's why they are going to for unsafe abortion. And talking about the data, 53% pregnancies are unintended. It means 2/3 pregnancies end in abortion. So when there is unintended pregnancy, abortion's chances are very high. So these are the data. And I think being a media person, I think there should be lots of awareness programs as Debanjana shared. There should be lots of training sessions for health workers, for women's leaders, for policymakers, for women's itself, themselves. They should be aware about the law. So what is there in law and what are the rights for them? So lack of awareness, social stigma, and accessibility problem, weak health system. These are the problems of safe abortion for the women. So media campaign, trainings, awareness, orientations must be there for the safe abortion and to save mothers. So I think so.
Thank you very much, Kalpana. And you shared the example of a healthcare worker.
Yeah.
When she could not exercise that right, what to talk of the other women? So having law is very important. Second part, as you said, women knowing about that law, or people who need an abortion knowing about that law, and then exercising it as their right. And so we have to work on all fronts. And also, as I have said earlier, even in countries even in Nepal, abortion is legal. But for whom? Because very often we just have, is it available for only the good, so-called good married women? Or is it available for any person who is in need of it and can access it with dignity? That is important. So safe abortion care is an integral part of not only sexual and reproductive health and rights, but also right to health. We have only 56 months left to deliver on Agenda 2030, promises enshrined in SDG 3 and SDG 5. Let us hope that anti-rights and anti-gender pushbacks will end, and finally gender equality and right to health will take center stage as fundamental human right. Thank you for now. See you all in our next She and Rights live session from Women